Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 43.
And during a drought, your earth starts to go. And so all you need to do is get a 5-gallon bucket of water and pour it on your ground rods.
You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers, and every episode features a grass farmer and their operation. I'm your host, Cal Hardage. On today's show, we have John Simmons of Yoke Ranch. John and his family have a regenerative cow-calf operation in northeast Texas. We discuss his journey and operation, as well as going on a couple tangents. Before we talk to John, our March giveaway is continuing with another winner today. If you didn't win or haven't participated, there is time. Listen after John's interview for more information. Let's go talk to John. So, John, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast. We're excited for you to join us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation?
Sure. I started ranching in 2012, full time. I took a big loan out and got a 400-acre lease, bought 100 cows. I didn't know the difference between a Holstein and a Hereford at the time.
Yes.
But fortunately, my father-in-law kind of held my hand along the way. And he's from New Zealand. And so he is a semi-retired New Zealand dairy farmer who bought land here, and now we do beef cattle. And so at the time we conceived our firstborn daughter, Molly, and it was a good time to change. And we got a low interest FSA loan to get going. And the lease was right across from my father-in-law's big ranch, and that's where it all began. And it was right before the market went crazy in 2014. So we were able we were able to pay off our loan pretty quickly and get some equity in the cows, and that's what we've been doing ever since. So I do own a small farm currently. And we've got about 35 cows there, and I work very closely with my father-in-law, and I work for him, managing all of his cows. So we run about 300 mama cows, a cow-calf operation.
Now, tell me a little bit about where you're located. I know sometimes it's been a decade since I've done this, but we used to buy bottle calves down in Sulphur Springs. So is that west of you a little bit?
So Hopkins, you came to Hopkins County to get bottle calves, and you raise bottle calves. You're up in Oklahoma somewhere, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So Hopkins County used to be the dairy capital of Texas. And so one of the reasons we settled here, and one of the greatest benefits, is we have sandy soil and 45 inches of annual rainfall. And so the real game is Bermuda grass and ryegrass. I got ahead of myself. You were asking me about the area. So it's Hopkins County. We're just 10 miles east of Sulphur Springs, an hour and a half east of Dallas.
And most of those dairies are gone now?
Yeah, they've been consolidated and chopped up. You know the story. Daddy had 300 acres, 4 kids that work in Dallas. They all, they get chopped up into 50-acre tracts and stuff like that. But and then, I'm still surrounded by dairy farms. We have a 3,000 dairy confinement operation to the east of us, And then we have a small holding on mom and pop dairy to the west of us. But yeah, so I mean, it's a great place to dairy farm for that reason, especially if you're grazing, which I guess the trend now is to do the confinement dairy. And so it almost doesn't matter where you live. I think there's a lot of dairies in central and west Texas
Oh, yes.
because of pneumonia and the humidity's better or whatever. But here, it's really hard to make mud because of the sand. It's because we've had ranching operations and leases in different areas of Northeast Texas. And when you go north of I-30, it really when you get closer up to the Red River, it starts to turn to clay. And if you have too many cows, too much herd impact, you can really pug
Oh,
the
yes.
mess out of it. And for that reason, this is a great place to dairy farm. And I've always been tempted. Actually, last week I bought my first nurse cow.
Oh, yes.
Um, and it's just a backyard nurse cow, and I put 2 little calves on it, so I'm sort of cheat coding it. This might be a rabbit trail, but I could rabbit trail all evening, or I could stay on tack. So, we put 2 calves on it so that I don't have to be tied to the milk cow, and so whenever I want some milk the night before, I'll sort off the 2 calves and get me a gallon, for the impending end of the world with, the way current events are going. So, anyways, I've always loved the idea of dairy farming, and my father-in-law has incredible knowledge of husbandry and pasture management from his intensive rotational grass-based New Zealand dairy farm that he owned and operated. That's translated really well to what we're doing here now. But at the end of the day, I've done my research, and I think we export 10% of all the milk we grow here in the United States. And I'm like, why would I get into that business? Right. And these mega dairies are just more and more milk. And so, anyways, I didn't come on here to talk about dairy.
No, I completely agree. I grew up on a
Oh,
dairy. I love
yeah.
dairying. My first introduction to rotational grazing is reading in a Stockman Grass Farmer and some books I have about New Zealand grass dairies.
It's
And
amazing.
and of course we had a low line double four herringbone barn. I wanted to put in like a 6 or 8 swings type, which is crazy because my grandpa dairied and he had a swinging 4 years and years ago, and then we upgraded it when we built our barn. We put in a low line double four herringbone, and then I was my goal was to then go to a 6 or a 8, really swing an 8, but didn't get there. Feed prices going up, milk prices not doing too much, and most people going to larger herds, more confinement,
Mhm.
just didn't work. Now, I have to say, and this is continuing on this rabbit hole, we'll get back to the other in a minute. Um, Up in Missouri by Springfield, there seems to be a rebirth of grass based dairies up in that area. There's quite a few up there, which I went and purchased some bottle calves because I have a affinity for bottle
Yep.
calves and nurse cows. I'd like to get some nurse
Okay.
cows.
Yeah. How about that? We still have a large family in New Zealand. And Melissa and I, my wife Melissa, we traveled there February, the first year of COVID. What is that? 2020 February. We were over in New Zealand for a few weeks in February, and COVID was just starting, and we were concerned about whether or not we were going to be able to get back. Or well, I was just
Oh, yes.
looking at international news. There was like 10 cases in Oregon or whatever, or however it started. We made it back, but I still have. Well, my wife still has 2 aunts that full time graze dairy in New Zealand. We visited both of their farms, and it was
Oh, yes.
unbelievable. It was unbelievable. Anyway, that's a different podcast, though. I could feel of the stuff that I saw over there, so it's pretty interesting.
Oh, I want to New Zealand is on my list of places I'd like to visit.
Yeah.
Haven't made it there yet, but I plan to.
Mm.
Okay, enough about that. Let's jump back to your journey.
Yes.
In 2012, you leased some land and bought some cows. And at that point, how much you didn't know a Hereford from a Holstein?
No. So I was teaching art at Appalachian State University, and my father-in-law and my wife was managing a a it's basically the southeast version of Whole Foods. It's a grocery chain called Earth Fare, and so
Okay.
we were getting into food. That's a little bit more of the story. We were relatively newlywed in 2010 or so, and I read The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. Is it Pollan or Pollan?
Oh, okay.
It's about
Yes.
people, but in that book, he features Joel Salatin from Virginia, the regenerative guy in Virginia. And I thought, that's kind of what Melissa's dad does. Okay. And so I started to have a conversation with my father-in-law about what he was doing, and I was like, man, that sounds great. And so one thing led to another, and I just, like I said, we conceived our daughter, and that was a time where in our life where it's just a big change. Was let's do it. It's a business opportunity. Ben was doing a good job on his farm, I could tell, and he's making money, and but it really wasn't so much about making money as it was the lifestyle that was appealing to me. So,
Oh,
and
yes.
my wife grew up on a New Zealand dairy farm, so she's agreeable to all the stuff that I want to do. Yeah.
So you found this lease. How'd you find land to lease? Because that's been a discussion different times on the podcast. Finding land to lease is difficult.
Well, there was my father-in-law, so he owned the property there. He bought it years before, an old
Oh,
an
yes.
old man across the road kind of deal. Um, it was very unique, and it was a good opportunity. It was right across the lease, or right across the property that my father-in-law owned, and so it worked out perfect for him because he could use a hand, right? And then it worked out perfect for me.
Oh, yes.
I could use a couple hands and a lot of good advice, to build my business, which is and what it's turned into now is really, I mean, our game is it's a low cost cow calf operation, grass based. We move the cows every day. Um, we wean the calves at 6 to 8 months old, and we actually retain most of the heifers.
Yes.
All the good heifers we'll keep, and sometimes we can go different uh, directions with that. So in we bought our cows in 2012. We had a year-to-year lease with this old guy, basically across the road, and so there was a little bit of uncertainty there. And I was learning how we farm. And then in 2017, I was looking around. We had 3 kids by then. That's when we stopped. So we had 3 total kids. And we were happy. We were year to year. We paid off our note on our cows in 5 years, which I'm really proud of. It's like $180,000 with cow money. I never, you know,
Oh, yes.
luckily or whatever, in 2014, we had weaned calves going for $1,150, and the lease price was right. I also did during that 5 years. I acquired another 250 acres that I did custom grazing on that cash flowed really well. So that kept the lights on.
Oh, yes.
The custom grazing kept the lights on, and then my cow calf operation paid for itself in about 5 years. So in 2017, it was kind of a moment where the market was lulling a little bit and I had a little bit of uncertainty. And so I casually started looking for ranch management jobs. And I thought to myself, I'd love to get paid every month instead of twice a year when I sell my calves. And so I had a great opportunity to go to Central Texas and manage a large, diversified estate type ranch. So it was a
Yes.
personal estate, sort of a high end place. I learned a ton working there. We had cows, goats, vineyard, pecan orchard, tons of construction projects. So I was it stretched me in ways I didn't know I could go. Um, that lasted for about 2.5 years. And meanwhile, my father in law sold his big ranch where we were farming north of the interstate. And
Oh, yes.
so he sold his big place and he moved south of I-30 here in Hopkins County and bought 3 other places. And yeah, around that time, um,
Oh, yes.
I was happy with my job, but it was kind of not like a I didn't love the long-term prospect of it. I thought it was gonna be a long-term deal when I went into it, and then I realized, it's a little thankless, and that's the absolute worst thing I could say because it was a really positive experience. I left on very good terms. But one day, it's 2.5 years ago, Ben called me and he said, "Hey, I need help." And so that's how I'm here today. Um, so I'm managing Ben's herds, and we're still in development mode. I think I told you I was on a chainsaw for about 6 hours today cleaning fence row. So we're right now we're understocked
Yes.
with our total operation, and we're in full development mode. While I was at the ranch managing for 2.5 years, whether I like it or not, I got a lot of practice and I got pretty good at developing land. So dozer work, skid steer work. We had a big track hoe, digging ponds, doing that kind of stuff. So the land that Ben bought a few years ago is pretty rough, needs a lot of work. So, but it's amazing what cattle can do um, to land if they're farmed properly. So,
It's amazing when we look at what cattle can do to your
mhm.
landscape and stuff using holistic management. You know, there's not always just, well, I move them here at this time and at this time. It's kind of, what's your purpose right there? And,
Yeah,
some of those sticker weeds, I want them stomped out.
sure,
I don't care if they
absolutely,
eat much of it. I want them stomped out.
yeah.
But they can do a lot.
And what we found, like we had a really wet spring this year, and some of these places got really sticky, and it's because how they and I'm not saying anything ill about my fellow farmer. I'll never do that. There's um one of the rule and I have to constantly remind myself one of the rules in a book I've just read by Jordan Peterson. It says make sure your house is in perfect order before you decide to criticize the world. And so as farmers or ranchers or stewards or whatever you want to call yourself, a lot of the times, at least myself, I'm guilty of this. I'll look over the fence and I'll think, man, they're not doing that right, or like but the truth is, our houses are not in perfect order, and we have fences that need to be fixed.
Oh,
So
I completely agree with you, John, on that. Um, Man, I look across the fence and sometimes I'm like, "Man, what are they doing there? They've grazed that too short." They've and I'm like, "You know what? They're doing what works for them, and it may not look just like what I'm doing, but I have to let
yeah,
go of that. I've got plenty on my side to worry about." But I do get that's
so,
kinda hard sometimes.
yeah, yeah. Because you wanna feel good about what you're doing, and you want to make it.
Right.
And there's this weird psychological thing about farming, and I might be going off the deep end here, but it's really intimate and it's really personal. All the stuff we do, and there's this, and I think it goes back to our long human connection to land, and it's profound and it's deeper than I can put into words. But there's something about that, it's this thing that that you have, and you think it's yours, and you think all the cows are yours, and
Yes.
they're gonna do what you want them to do. Um, but if we talk about Salatin and some of these thinkers who wrote these books on holistic management and regenerative agriculture, it's really Salatin talks a lot about building in forgiveness in our grazing programs, and that's absolutely a perfect way to explain it. Having forgiveness built into the system is what makes it work.
Let's talk about okay, so you got your land. Did you all start rotational grazing immediately on that 400 acres in 2012?
Yes, there was, so we had a shoestring budget. I mean, we always have a shoestring budget, no matter
Yes.
what. And some of the one wire gates that I've built are just a work of art, with just junk, secondhand, repurposed, not meant to do that stuff. And so the whole farm, we target to build the best design, and we could talk about pasture design, but the best design that we use is, and in our environment and everything, is a 20-acre permanent one wire pasture. That's the ideal size for about 100 cows. And then we like to pipe a permanent water trough up in the front, sort of the front end of the pasture.
Okay, yeah.
And when I say we move the cows every day, what we're doing is we're doing what we call break feeding or strip grazing, some people might call it. So we depending on the time of year and you know what's going on with the cows, if they're lactating or dry or whatever, and how much grass we have, we can really control our grass in that way. Some days that 20 acres will give 100 cows 8 days, and sometimes it'll just be one day. The original lease that we had, we worked together and we built one wire 14 gauge galvanized steel wire with a T-post every 25 paces, so every 75 feet, right at belt height for a cow's nose,
Oh, yes.
to hold them in. And so that was the deal. And the water system is always a challenge, especially for folks, like that might be listening who are starting out or
Oh,
don't know
yes.
where to start, you know. And so I've done a little bit of all of it. We've had a siphon out of a pond over a berm into a trough. We've done a lot of gravity feed stuff on our owned land with our permanent uh, systems here in Como. We have really really good groundwater. So at a little over 150 feet of depth, we can have like human quality water for the cows. And so it's all pressurized. It's a pressurized system, and we've dug a lot of wells. I just finished. What I'm kind of excited about is my little off grid solar well system.
I think you have a post on your Instagram about it.
I do. I do, yeah. Yeah, when I get around to it, I'd like to post some more stuff and update the website as well, but there's, like, nothing on the website, but, I
It's a
fill
work
my
in
days with
progress.
right, 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 right. So, but
So
yeah,
for
so the
for your land now, you're digging these wells to have pressurized water everywhere.
yeah, the wells are all done. So the first
Oh, okay.
when you're setting out to develop land for anyone who's interested, the first thing you need to resolve is water. You need to get a plan together. The first thing you look at your land, how it's shaped, grazable acres, whatever your vision is. And so we go through and we look at each place and see what it needs. And like I said before, the ideal pasture for our program is about a 20-acre long rectangle with a permanent concrete water trough up near the front end of it. So you get day one, day two, day three, etc. So the water goes in first, preferably, and the fences will go over the water. And but man, we struck it really good about a year and a half ago. We found the TxDOT place right 10 minutes down the road. The TxDOT had this yard of posts, and we got, I don't know how many hundred posts. We might have got over 1,000 posts.
Oh,
Just come and
yes.
take them. They were putting these like 8-inch diameter treated wood posts. They're so heavy. That's why I get to go to the chiropractor every month or so from schlepping around these posts, these TxDOT posts. But you can see our fence from a mile away because it's the one with the TxDOT post. We have a big uh, post banger, which is really nice. And so, I mean, we fenced up a 300-acre place here into 14 permanent pastures with pressurized water, the TxDOT posts for the cross fences, one wire, 12 and a half gauge high tensile wire, me and a hired hand, the two of us, in 3 months. And so your question was, have we been rotational grazing since then? Yes. Like I said, we're kind of lightly stocked right now, um, because we have been growing. But we all the troughs are in, all the pastures are in, and now we're just kind of brushing up the edges on the places and clearing some brush and rebuilding some old ratty perimeter fence that needs attention.
Jumping back just a little bit, you talked about it's a long 20. What you found is a pretty ideal paddock size for your operation, and you're putting water
Mhm.
at one end, and you're moving that electric fence down as you go, and you're not putting a back fence on it, right? So just so our listeners understand, you're putting a fence out in their grazing area, and then you're giving them another break, and they're able to go
Yeah.
clear back for the water.
Yeah, and the good thing about that is, at least where we live, if if we were possibly if we were in a different area, I might be more interested in doing back fences or reworking the water a little bit. But we get 45 inches of rain, and so the dynamic of the herd and the and and how it is also part of the reason I'm in this is the lifestyle. And I'm not trying to move cows 4 or 5 times a day. I have no judgment for, bless their heart, all these people who are moving their cows multiple times a day. It's very possible that that is a good thing. Um, yeah, I think it is a good thing. It probably, theoretically it is. But at some point, you have to make a decision about what you want to do and what your fantasy is, what your agriculture fantasy is. And so mine is moving the cows exactly one time a day.
I have a very similar goal of moving one time a day. But because I work off the farm and have a day job and it gets dark as I'm barely home, um, my cows are having longer stays in paddocks before I move them on. I think on the weekend I need to put up more paddocks so I can go move them. But I get home and I'm like, maybe I'll wave at you today. I'll go visit tomorrow. But yeah, you got to find out what works for you and what your parameters are and what you desire from it as well.
I've learned a lot about cattle from observing them, and so I do have a background in art, and it's a stretch, but some of the a lot of the things we do as grazers are based on visual clues. You know, we're looking at the grass, we're looking at the cows, how content they are, if they're following you around on the four-wheeler, you know, um, how filled their gut is, you know, all these things that you have to look for. And if you and it takes time and experience to know what to look for, right? And there's going to be some train wrecks because you're going to miss some stuff, and I'd miss stuff too. But you know, when she's getting ready to have a calf, oh
Yes.
well, it's a heifer. I might need to go check her again. So one of the things, by moving them once a day as a minimum and a maximum, let's say it that way,
Oh,
we're
yes.
still getting to evaluate those cows every single day. And that's most that, you know, it takes 10 minutes to move 100 cows, but that's the most important 10 minutes
Oh,
of my
right.
day, because I'll
Yes.
know whether I need to do something or whether I need to change my, you know, the last cows, you know. And it's a lot of people these days are getting really caught up. I'm going to call them the gurus. They're getting caught up in one thing or a handful of things, or we have to move the cows this many times, or we have to have this type of cow, we have to have this species of grass. And a lot of the times when I talk to sort of beginners, or I've done a little bit of consulting work, everybody wants to know, like, what is it I need to do? What is it I need to change? And I hate using the word, but it's like a holistic approach. Everything matters. You know, there's no shortcuts, and that's why I love it so much. Is because I just live it and breathe it, and I wouldn't want to do anything else. So moving the cows every day with a strip graze, I and see, and most I would. I mean, I'm not sure about your listeners, but most people moving the cows once a day will be an improvement. We could probably agree on that.
Yes.
Okay. And so you're going to improve so much in what you're doing. I mean, if you're moving them once a month, if you can go to once a week or once every, all of that's going to improve. And it's not only going to improve your soil or your grass or your cows, it'll improve all of the above, right? But it's also going to improve your management of your herd, because seeing those cows walk, you know, rolling up the click, 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 the poly wire, and the cows walking behind me. Well, the first 90% of the cows coming through, I don't have to look at them. The sick ones, or the ones that are about to calve, or whoever is going to be the last one. And then, you know, depending on her symptoms, or what's going on with whatever, you can make decisions every day. You know? And so a lot of the times, one of the things that falls by the wayside when we do continual grazing or more conventional type grazing is it's too late to do anything
Yes.
for your grass or your cows. At any time at any time during the year, we can drive around on the four-wheeler for 15 minutes, and I can say I've got 8 days of grass there, I've got 10 days here, I've got 20 days there, and I can say, okay, it's July 4th. If it doesn't rain for 50 days, I'll be fine. And then on day 51, I'm going to need to do something, right? So
you saying that, I don't know about East Texas, but it was pretty dry this last fall for us. There's numerous times I went around. I remember going around saying, I got 6 weeks of grazing. And then in 6 weeks, it felt like there'd been no rain. I'm like, I need more grass. But yeah,
yeah, you're right. It's been pretty dry here too, and these farms that we're developing, some of them are better and some of them held on a little bit longer. I think we've got 3 main herds and 300 cow herds. And one of the farms we started feeding a little bit of hay around Thanksgiving.
oh yes,
And one of them I started feeding hay last week. So, and all 3 of them are eating hay now. That's 70% of their diet right now. There's still some
yes,
picking, but it's
right,
slim picking. And so we unroll the hay with a hay unroller on the back of the tractor, and we sort of simulate the grazing every day. And so I really take the hay unroller as a tool, which I guess is coming later with your famous 4 questions. I'm giving it away. Well, no, I've got a different tool. I've got a lot of tools, but yeah. So, but the hay unroller, every day, taking it out and rolling it. I mean, not literally every day in strips like we would strip grazing, but we'll probably move the cows back to like 4 days or so per pasture of the 20-acre pastures, and we'll unroll that. The hay is just sort of moderate quality cow hay, and we use that as a passive fertility program.
oh yes.
So there's an argument to feed more hay in the richer parts of the farm so you can grow more grass, or you can feed out your hay in the poorer parts of the farm to try to develop it and get some organic matter and all that. So we do a little bit of both. Usually the better ground is drier when we have weather events and stuff like that. But everything's flexible. We build in flexibility and forgiveness to every aspect of the program. So.
Which I think is important. And we're going to jump back just a little bit. You mentioned type of cow, and the gurus have a type of cow. What kind of type of cow are you using?
They can only have this color hide, right? Or their ears can only be this long. Or if they're this long, they don't work. They don't work anywhere. Oh, these cows work everywhere.
Right. And
right?
yeah.
The gurus. All right. Okay. So we're high percentage Black Angus and Red Angus. And there's a little bit of Hereford genetics. We use all purebred Red Angus bulls. And so because we found they've done a little bit better with the heat than the black-hided animals do. But all animals aren't created equal. And so I've got more heat-tolerant black cows than red cows. And so the main way to develop cows the main way that we develop our cow herd is based on, is she pregnant? Right. And so, and is she pregnant on time? So that's another thing we could get into. So, but most of our cows are fall calving, and I feel about 4 years ago, if you'd asked me spring calving or fall calving, I saw the world as black and white, and spring calving is the only way because you have your flush grass and that argument. Since we've moved south of I-30, we drilled about 300 acres of ryegrass and crimson clover, and we have this sandy soil, and we've got with mild winters. And so the only real challenge about fall calving is you're asking that cow to get pregnant in the months of end of December and January, and then a few in February. And you have to have their energy high. You have to have their diet correct for a cow to breed. I knew a rancher guy that I really respected. And this is a perfect example of keeping your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. He had this beautiful herd. It was like 200 mama cows of Hereford old 1950 model Hereford Trask bloodline cow herd right up the road from here. I've bought a couple of bulls from him. He is a hands-off kind of management guy, like not like moving the cows one, now two, month later, now one, month later, now
Yes.
two. Okay, he's casual. He's a casual rotational grazing. He's rotational grazing with a little R. Okay?
I love the
Not a
term
capital
casual
R.
rotational grazing. I've got a neighbor that does casual rotational grazing, and I didn't even realize that's what he was doing till you just said it. That's exactly what he's doing.
And he swears, and his calving. Now, the one thing he does manage really well, because he does seed stock stuff, is he puts his bulls in for 60 days and he takes them out, which I can pick that apart, but we'll do that maybe in a minute. Naturally, his cows, 60 or 70% of them are fall calving, and I think it's because, well, we don't have, that's a rabbit trail. We don't have to get into that, but I really like not breeding cows in June and July and August, and I like having dry, fat, shaded up cows in the month of August, right? That have a safe little baby inside of it, instead of a baby pulling them down, because if they're fat enough, our falls are so mild and our winters are so mild. If we're doing a good job with our grass and with our genetics development of what we're keeping and what we're culling, she'll maintain her body condition till we turn the bulls out on Christmas. Merry Christmas, boys, right? So we turn the bulls out on Christmas. Our cows are still in. They have a calf starting October 1st. And we usually have a good amount of stockpiled Bermuda grass, mostly Bermuda grass, Dallas grass, Bahia grass, a little bit of Johnson grass. You got to be careful with Johnson grass, but it's common, sort of common forages. I wish we don't really have that many native forages that would stand up with the ranches we have. I do have plans to introduce some, especially around some riparian areas, some switchgrass, and maybe some little blue stem or something like that. We don't have very many grasses that really hold up after Christmas, and so we do build in the idea of feeding some hay, and I'm getting back around to hay. It's not like I like talking about hay, but we're talking
part
about
of your program,
what we do. So unrolling marginal quality cow hay on your farm, it simulates the daily moves, and you can also control how much hay is being. It's like a controlled starvation winter program. If we have really good quality genetics, it's amazing what a cow can do. Now, none of our cows are skinny, and we're doing something really wrong when they get too skinny. And so take that with a grain of salt, about especially sort of the beginning type farmers. When I say it's amazing what a cow can put up with through the winter. Don't go kill your cow. Don't starve your cows to death. But be educated. You know, we know a cow eats a certain percentage of her body weight, and she needs a certain amount of protein, a certain amount of dry matter. But I've always told people, it really, I mean, the main takeaway I think from earlier when I was talking about developing and what's the one good trick. I'd rather have really good water than really good grass if I had a choice. I'd rather have, and part of that's because I'm not doing stalkers. Like, our cows can do pretty good on cardboard, you know, just dry matter, you know, and their poops will stack up to the ceiling, right? But they can lose a little bit of condition in the winter. A slightly skinnier cow, and I'm talking skinny on the level of obese. Our cows are usually obese in July and August when they're dried off. They're too fat, and then they might lose a little bit of weight in August and September as the heat starts to work on them. But they're still in let's see, a body condition score of 5 or 6 by the time we turn out the bulls. And so thinking about all aspects of everything all day. We haven't even talked about bulls yet. We could do an hour on bulls because I really like selecting bulls. And you can move your herd in a direction in just a couple of generations with the right bull, especially if you're retaining heifers. So, I will add in there, some people might be curious. We've been marketing our steer calves locally through a preconditioned yearling sale. If you don't know what that is, that's it's a sale called the Net Bio Sale. It's bi-monthly, and so it's all weaned steer calves with like a respiratory vaccination. They've been weaned 45 days, I think, is the rule. Oh no, they just upped it to 60 days. So the rule is they're 60 days. So we get a little bit of premium out of those steers. And if you study the markets a little bit, I think as long as I've been doing this, the undervalued cattle are open weaned heifer calves. And so if we took all of our weaned calves into the sale, we'd average $150 less on our heifers. And with the bulls that we're selecting, they're highly maternal bulls. They're not big framey Charolais bulls that are going to have, awful udders and all that kind of stuff. But they're very maternal bulls. And so our heifer calves are really good. Like most of the heifer calves are worth being cows. Or at least giving them a chance. So we add value to those heifers, and we have sold weaned heifers, for about the same price of steers if we need a little bit of cash flow, or we'll keep them to a yearling, sell open yearling heifers. You can get a premium there. Then you can sell them as exposed short-bred heifers. We can keep going with this. You can sell them as heavy-bred heifers, or you can sell them as first calf pairs. So you've got a little bit more time in those animals, but you've added a lot of value to them. And also you have flexibility in your marketing plan. So we can go multiple directions with all the animals. I think, and I agree with, I listened to your last one with the guy from Ohio. What was his name? James?
Yes. James. I'm trying to think of his last name. Caufelt. James Caufelt. Yeah, Ohio Land and Cattle.
James Caufelt. He was great. I totally agree. He said a lot of interesting things. One of the things that I totally agree with is if you're not is somewhere around 450 to 500 pounds, that steer calf is not gaining that much value. In fact, um, a neighbor of mine sold a bunch. He's real proud of his weaning weights, and we were comparing our sales sheet like a good rancher
Yes.
does. And his 600-pound, they've got a little bit of ear, a little bit of Brangus cross into them. They sold for less per head than my little dinky, short-legged, grass-fed 500-pound
yes.
steers. So just that's a paradigm that we all talk about. How bigger is not necessarily better, and I think the industry is starting to follow that. And I don't think it's going to correct anytime soon. Like, for example, Red Angus is really hot right now.
Yes.
They're doing as good as the Black Angus cattle are here locally, at least.
Oh, and you mentioned the market's starting to realize it, and they're starting to correct that. They're going to overcorrect, and it's going to go off another way.
Yeah.
Just I look at, and I'm not in the show cattle business, and I see these pictures of
Right.
club calves, and I'm like, oh, I don't want that heifer out in my pasture. But that's me. It's going to work for them and
Right.
what they're doing, but that's me.
Mm-hmm.
John, we could talk, I think, for quite a while, and listeners would probably get over it in a certain point. So it's probably time we go ahead and move to our famous 4 questions, and that'll get us about an
Sounds good.
hour episode, and I think that'll be good. Our famous 4 questions, same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. Our first question is, what's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
I read your famous 4 questions, and I've pondered it. Probably anything by Wendell Berry, even though it isn't specifically grazing grass all the time. He does talk. It's usually always agrarian themed. One book I just finished was called Culture and Agriculture. That's pretty interesting. Probably, I mean, did you ask for 1 or 10?
You know
books?
what? You
So I can give you a
share
list
what
of
you think would help someone else.
Yeah, Salad Bar Beef by
Yes.
Joel Salatin. That was pretty fundamental, and I'll say that with an asterisk. Joel, and one thing I think he may fail to convey, he's got a lot of experience, and he knows what he's doing, and he's one of the gurus who is a hard liner. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in the terms of a beginner needs to compromise anything that they're doing, but in agriculture, in life, but especially in agriculture, it's not always black and white, you know. And like earlier when I said we're going to starve our cows this winter, well, me saying that means one thing, right? And if that doesn't mean go buy 5 cows and starve them to death, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah, the one size doesn't fit all. You've got to, it's got to fit what you're
right.
doing, and we touched on some of that earlier. Wendell Berry, I'm not sure I've read any of his books, so I'm gonna have to look
Yeah.
him up.
Culture and Agriculture is a really good one. And then I'm right in the middle of a lot of his books are collections of essays.
Oh yes.
And he has some. I think he has a couple of fiction ones. I haven't read all his books, but I'm currently reading The Gift of Good Land,
Oh, okay.
and it's great. He's poetic. He's poetic. He's based out of Kentucky. He's got a famous quote that says, I'll try not to botch this. Do unto those downstream as you would have those upstream do unto you.
Yes. And yeah, and that
You
could
like
be
that?
related in so many different ways. Moving on to our second question, which you kind of alluded to earlier. What tool could you not live without on your farm?
My fence tester. So I get to the farm, and we have our farms are in different locations. I'll get out, probably not every day because we're kind of humming now. But after if we have a windy night or a weather night, I can hop out of my truck and test my fence, and I'll know if the world is going to be correct that day or not, or the cows are going to be where I left them. That's probably the tool I use the most. That and the hay unroller in the winter, I think are two really useful tools. But a lot of people say, "Oh, my cows don't respect hot wire," or something like that. And I was like, "Well, your wire might not be hot then." It sounds like to me.
I'll be
So
perfectly honest and a little transparent here. For years, we struggled with that, and we're like, and everything I read, these electric fences work, but man, we could not get them to function as well as I thought they should. And and to be honest, once I did more reading, more research into it, just putting a proper grounding system in place makes a world's of difference. And you get that fence hot, you don't have to worry about where animals are. You don't have to worry about me touching it either. That's the reason
that's
I
right.
like that fence tester.
I a little tip on the fencing too for everyone out there is, and this goes back to moving the cows every day. Visual clues, knowing what the weather's doing, knowing what the season is doing. If we're in an extreme drought, I'm usually what we call screwing our cows down. And so, when the spring is lush and everything, the 100 cows might get 3 acres of grass a day. And then in August, if we're in a tight drought and I've got 40 days of grass, they might get they will get less grass. And so you'll know that is going to put more pressure on your fences. And during a drought, your earth starts to go. And so all you need to do is get a 5-gallon bucket of water and pour it on your ground rods. How about that for a tip?
That
That's a tip. And your fence will jump up 1 whole kilovolt.
and that's a free bonus for everyone out there listening.
Because and the cows usually don't test the fences until they get hungry, and so in the
Oh yeah.
winter we also open up a little bit on the cows. They'll probably get the whole pasture. Sometimes we'll cut the pasture in half, just depending on what the ryegrass is doing and what's going on.
You talked about putting water on your ground rod, which will make a tremendous difference when it's dry. One thing I like to do if I'm putting my electric fence and sometimes I'm moving my energizer, I try and put it near a wet spot so that I can put those ground rods there.
That's another good tip. Yeah, we usually do the ground rods on a drip line of the barn.
Oh yes.
The permanent plug-in energizer plugs in the barn. I've seen, and it's important to read the instructions when you get your ground system. I've seen ground rods, 2 feet apart, and they
Oh
need
yes.
some space between them. The fence is almost as good as the ground.
A good grounding system will make worlds of difference. Moving on to our third question. What would you tell someone just getting started?
Try to do all the research you can, but don't get too bogged down on what exactly you're going to do, because you don't know what you're going to do and you don't know how it's going to go. But also don't be fearful of the unknown. So, try to make your decisions, you know, uh, I shared a studio with a sculptor once, and he was really meticulous, and he had fantastic detail in his sculptures. And he said, and I was like, man, Daniel, do you ever make any mistakes? And he said, yeah, I make mistakes, but when I do, I make them very slowly. And when you make that mistake, you can change it, and so don't bite off more than you can chew.
One thing as you say that jumps into my head that I just heard the other day, and I'm trying to think if I heard it on a podcast or where I heard it, and I'm leaning towards the Bigger Pockets podcast, but I could be wrong on that. But they were talking about, as you mentioned, doing something. Don't get froze in there, and they likened it to a ship. If a ship is stationary, it's hard to turn. But if that ship is moving and you need to turn because your target's changed or it's not working out quite as good, it's easier to turn a moving ship than a stationary ship. Which I thought, oh, that's a really good visual of it.
Mm-hmm.
And John, lastly, where can others find out more about you?
Well, I have a very underdeveloped website, but my contact information is on it. It's easyyoke.com, EZYOKE.com. If you go to the website, it also has a link to my Instagram that I periodically update.
Wonderful. And, on your Instagram, that's where I saw some of your photos of what you're doing and your well you'd put in Easy Yoke Ranch. But we'll put both links down in our show notes. But yeah, you can get to it all from your website. Very good. John, I've enjoyed this conversation. Granted, it needed to be a few hours longer, but I've enjoyed it.
A few hours, that's good. Yeah, I also I really appreciate you having me on. It was great, and I've really enjoyed listening to some of the episodes that you've had. I think I've listened to at least 4 or 5 of them, and it's good. It's all good stuff. I love to network and talk about ideas and learn about the world, our only world.
I've mentioned this before. I started this for selfish reasons. It gives me an avenue to talk to all these other people that uh, I would have had to work or network better with, and a podcast gives me the avenue that, hey, I can say, hey, you want to talk on the podcast? They're like, okay. So then I get
Sure.
these conversations which are wonderful.
Yeah, that's good.
I trust you enjoyed our conversation with John. As always, it was great to hear how another grass farmer is operating their farm. Lots of valuable information in our discussion. I really enjoyed his description for an ideal paddock or pasture for his farm. And that's something that's going to be very unique to your farm. But it's always good to hear what works for others. Also, don't forget to water those. Whoa, let me try that sentence again if you don't mind. Also, don't forget to water those ground rods when it gets dry. I mentioned earlier in the podcast about a giveaway. It'll only take you a couple minutes to do. Go to Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to the podcast and leave a review. The reviews help us get the word out about our podcast, and our growth is just amazing to me. So thank you for telling others about our podcast. After leaving a review, take a screenshot and email it to me at cal, C-A-L, at grazinggrass.com. At the end of the week, we will draw a winner, and they will receive Greg Judy's latest book, How to Think Like a Grazer. If you follow our Instagram page, you may have noticed a sneak peek of our new shirts on our story. I think they've turned out great, and they will be available on the website soon. You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers learn from grass farmers. And every episode features a grass farmer and their operation. Hey, I need your help for just a second, if you don't mind. Should we change our tagline? Jump over to the Grazing Grass community and let me know your thoughts. You can find the Grazing Grass Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and we encourage you to share our posts. Are you a grass farmer? Are you interested in sharing about your journey and what you're doing on your farm? Go to our website, grazinggrass.com, click on the Be Our Guest link, fill out the form, and I'll be in touch. Until next time, keep on grazing grass. Hey there, listeners. We appreciate you tuning in and want to continue bringing you the best content we can. But producing a podcast takes a lot of time and effort, so we need your support. You can help us out by joining the Grazing Grass community and becoming a supporter for exclusive content and early releases. Also, you can buy our merch to show your love for the show, or by using our affiliate links to purchase products or services we recommend. If you can't support us financially, please spread the word and tell others about our show. Thank you for your support, and we can't wait to bring you more great conversations from grass farmers like you.